Imagine for a second, right, that you are a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. You are a deeply, profoundly unhappy lawyer.
Oh man, yeah, that is a rough place to be.
Right. You wake up every single morning, the alarm goes off, and you just feel this immediate crushing weight in your chest. You are just completely dreading the 9 to 5 grind.
Yeah, that absolute dread. It's exhausting.
Really is. And you're completely miserable in a profession that, you spent years studying for,
Hmm.
taking out loans for, only to realize you absolutely hate it. It's that suffocating feeling of being trapped by your own choices.
Well, and that feeling of being locked in a life you built but no longer actually want, that is an incredibly heavy psychological burden. And I mean, most people who find themselves in that exact situation, they just accept it.
They just sort of put their heads down.
Right. They put their heads down, they collect the paycheck, and they let that underlying misery become their baseline. And then they just spend the next 30 years counting down to retirement.
But the guy we are focusing on today did not do that. Instead of resigning himself to a lifetime of corporate misery, he completely blew up his career. He walked away from the law entirely to become a motivational speaker.
Wow.
Yeah. This is the real-life story of Jeff Keller. He's the guy who wrote a very famous book called Attitude is Everything.
It's a fascinating pivot, honestly, because to make a jump like that, to abandon a secure, prestigious career for something entirely unproven, you have to fundamentally rewire how you process reality. You have to change the basic operating system of your brain.
Which is exactly what we are doing today. Welcome to a deep dive into the actual practical mechanics of attitude. Now, I want to set some ground rules right out of the gate here. Our mission today is not to preach toxic positivity,
Oh, thank goodness.
right? We aren't here to tell you to just, smile through the pain or pretend bad things don't happen.
No, absolutely not. We are looking at attitude as a mechanical function. It is a controllable mental filter that literally dictates what you are capable of achieving. So we are going to unpack a specific framework today, think, speak, and act, and look at the psychology behind why it actually works.
So whether you are prepping for a massive high-stakes meeting this afternoon or, you're just feeling stuck in a rut and can't figure out why, this deep dive is for you. We are going to reveal how the mental dirt you've accumulated over the years might actually be the only thing standing in your way.
And it all starts with the mind, because before you can change your external reality, you have to understand the internal lens through which you are viewing it.
Which makes sense. So where do we start?
Well, let's use Keller's analogy here, which I think is incredibly visual. He calls your attitude your window to the world. And when we are born, that window is completely squeaky clean.
Like zero smudges.
Exactly. Think about a toddler who is just learning to walk. That is the perfect example of a pristine mental window. When that toddler takes a step and falls flat on their face, what happens?
Well, they definitely don't blame the carpet for being too slickery.
Right. They don't frown. They don't look up at their parents and criticize their poor walking instructions. They don't internalize the fall as a personal failure.
They just giggle, pull themselves up on the coffee table, and try again. And they keep doing it until they succeed. Because, failure isn't a permanent identity for a toddler. It's just incoming data. It's just gravity teaching them about balance.
Yes. But then, we grow up, and as adults, life starts throwing things at us. We experience harsh criticism from a boss, a painful rejection from a partner, maybe profound financial disappointments.
Right. Real life happens.
Real life happens, and every single one of those negative experiences acts like a glob of mud hitting that mental window.
And instead of grabbing a squeegee and wiping that dirt off, we just get used to it. Like we accept the blurry, pessimistic, smeared view of the world as objective reality. We start thinking, well, the world is just a dark place, when really we're just looking at it through a filthy piece of glass.
And the psychological weight of that dirty filter is immense. I mean, maintaining a clean window isn't just about feeling warm and fuzzy. It has measurable physical and cognitive impacts.
Wait, really? Physical impact?
Oh, definitely. A positive mental filter actually mitigates the onset of depressive spirals. It relaxes the body's nervous system, lowering cortisol levels, which in turn directly impacts your cognitive ability to solve problems and achieve goals. When you look at extreme historical examples like Viktor Frankl, this becomes glaringly obvious.
Okay, Frankl was the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, right?
He was. And Frankl observed firsthand that the prisoners who maintained an optimistic attitude, specifically those who actively focused on finding meaning and maintaining hope for the future, were physically and mentally more likely to find the strength to survive. Yeah. And they weren't ignoring the horror of their reality. Obviously, that would be impossible. But by managing their internal filter, they preserved their biological and psychological resources. Frankel essentially proved that while we cannot always control our external circumstances, we retain complete control over our response to them.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because applying that to our daily lives feels like we are dealing with a subconscious algorithm.
Yeah.
If you don't actively take control of creating new, positive mental movies for yourself, your brain will just dig into its own archives.
Exactly. It defaults to the familiar.
Right. It will keep replaying those old, comforting failures and rejections because they are what it knows. But I had to push back a little here. Isn't just thinking positive a bit of a trap? Like, if we just expect overnight success because we smiled at our reflection in the mirror today, aren't we setting ourselves up for a much harder fall?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That is the danger of what we might call sporadic optimism. Just having a
Mhm.
good thought on a Tuesday and expecting a promotion on Wednesday does absolutely nothing.
Right, that's just delusion.
Yeah, sporadic optimism is just daydreaming. What actually changes reality is the law of dominant thought.
Dominant being the operative word there.
Exactly. It is your sustained dominant thoughts that drive your actions. Henry Ford summarized this brilliantly. He said, "Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right."
I love that quote.
It's so accurate.
Yeah.
And the mechanism behind this isn't magic, it's neurology. Your brain has a filtering system called the reticular activating system, or RAS. Its job is to filter out the billions of pieces of data around you and only show you what it thinks is important.
Okay, so how does that connect to the dominant thought?
Well, if your dominant thought is, say, "I am terrible at public speaking," your brain will actively look for evidence to prove you right. You will notice every slight yawn in the audience and completely ignore every engaged nod.
Oh, wow. So it's basically a self-fulfilling prophecy fueled by confirmation bias.
That is exactly what it is. Let's look at the singer Celine Dion as an example of leveraging this. She didn't just casually hope to be a successful singer one day. From the time she was 5 years old, she utilized intense, deliberate visualization.
At 5 years old.
Yes. She held on to this incredibly vivid mental movie of singing for huge crowds, of winning awards, and she didn't just watch that movie once. She kept it running on a loop in her head for decades.
So because that was her dominant thought, her brain was primed to look for every single opportunity, every vocal coach, every audition that aligned with that reality. It guided her grueling practice schedule and her resilience through all the inevitable rejections.
Exactly. She kept her window clean so she could spot the opportunities through the glass. And that brings us to the next crucial step. If your thoughts are the internal blueprint of your life, your words are the actual construction tools you use to build it in the real world.
I really love that framing. Because internal thoughts can be messy, but the moment you speak something out loud, you are bringing it into physical reality. There is a very specific sequence we have to look at here from the sources. It's a chain reaction. Thoughts lead to words, words lead to beliefs, beliefs lead to actions, and actions lead to results.
And that chain reaction can be a vicious cycle or a virtuous cycle. It entirely depends on the vocabulary you choose to put into it.
Right. Think about a college student who is struggling with a mandatory computer science class. If they walk around campus for 4 years, repeatedly saying out loud to their friends, "I can't code, I'm terrible at coding," they think they are just venting, right?
Yeah, just blowing off steam.
But according to this formula, they are literally programming their own mind to fail. They speak the words solidify into a deep, unshakable belief that they are fundamentally incapable. That belief stops them from staying up late to study or asking for help, which is the action phase, and the inevitable result is they fail the class.
That is spot on. Now flip that formula and look at someone like Kent Cullers. He is a brilliant physicist and astronomer. He also happens to be totally blind. Cullers deliberately and publicly described his blindness as a trivial affliction.
Wait, calling total blindness a trivial affliction is wild. That is such a bold relabeling of reality.
It is bold. But think about the psychological power of that specific choice of words. By calling it a trivial affliction, he completely neutralized what most people would consider a massive, insurmountable limitation.
How does that work neurologically?
Well, when you call something a disaster, your brain's fear center, the amygdala, takes over. You panic or freeze. When you call something trivial, your brain stays calm and engages the prefrontal cortex to simply solve the puzzle. His words built a belief that his blindness didn't matter, which allowed him to take the actions necessary to become a highly successful scientist.
Man, it really makes you rethink every casual conversation you have, even how we answer the most basic, mundane question in the English language, which is, how are you?
Yes. That question is the perfect daily litmus test for your mental window. When someone asks how you are, your response usually falls into one of three buckets: negative, mediocre, or positive.
Well, the negative is obvious. You run into someone at the coffee shop and say, I'm exhausted, or terrible, or surviving. But the mediocre bucket is the sneaky one, I think. It's the default for most of us. Like, I'm fine, not bad, hanging in there.
Right, and when you use those negative or mediocre phrases, you are reinforcing a neutral or pessimistic reality. You are literally telling your nervous system to stay in a sluggish, uninspired state.
Seriously, just from saying I'm fine.
Yes. But if you force yourself to reply enthusiastically saying, I'm terrific or never better, even if you don't fully feel it in that exact second, it actually changes your physiology. Your posture shifts, your vocal tone brightens, your brain gets a tiny hit of dopamine just from the act of projecting enthusiasm.
And it completely alters the energy of the person you're talking to as well. You become a human magnet for better interactions. People want to be around the person who is doing terrific, not the person who is just hanging in there. Which I guess brings us to the ultimate verbal poison, complaining.
Oh, complaining is the act of smearing mud directly onto your own mental window. There is a fantastic quote from Lady Holland that illustrates this perfectly. She said, "Troubles, like babies, grow larger by nursing."
That is so true. Complaining offers literally zero solutions. It only drains your energy and, honestly, it forces everyone trapped in the room with you to carry your cognitive load.
It really does. To put the danger of complaining into perspective, let's look at the story of a man named Pedro, who survived the absolute devastation of Hurricane Mitch.
Oh, that was a horrific storm.
A catastrophic natural disaster, yes. He lost incredibly heavily. His home, his possessions, everything was washed away. But instead of complaining about the weather or endlessly reciting the inventory of his massive material losses, he remained relentlessly positive and proactive.
Because he focused his words entirely on gratitude. Gratitude for his life, for his health, for the fact that his family survived. And because his words were focused on the resources he still had, his actions naturally gravitated toward rebuilding.
Exactly. If he had spent his time complaining about what was gone, he would have been paralyzed.
But we do have to be careful here because we've reached a critical juncture in this deep dive. We've talked about cleaning the mental window. We've talked about changing our vocabulary from complaining to empowering. But words without action are just wishes. You can't just talk your way out of the aftermath of a hurricane.
No, you definitely can't. This is where attitude has to translate into overcoming real-world obstacles. As Keller puts it, heaven helps those who act. And acting requires us to fundamentally redefine the word commitment.
Right, because most people think commitment means trying really hard for a while.
Yeah, for a few weeks, maybe. But true commitment is an attitude of doing whatever it takes, legally and ethically, of course, to reach your objective. It means you burn the boats. There is no plan B.
There's an incredible story in the sources about a guy named Benjamin Roll. This man decided he wanted to be a lawyer. So he took the California bar exam, which is notoriously one of the most brutal professional exams in the country. And he failed.
Which happens to a lot of people.
Exactly. So he studied, paid the hefty fees again, and took it a second time. And failed. He ended up failing it 13 times.
Just think about the emotional and financial toll of that. Most people would have quit after 3 attempts, maybe 4 if they were unusually stubborn. Society would have told him it was perfectly okay to quit.
But Roll had that true no plan B commitment. He kept going, kept adjusting his study habits, kept managing his mental window, and he finally passed the bar exam at the age of 74.
That is the essence of persistence driven by a dominant thought. And then there's Dave Bruno. He was involved in a near-fatal car accident, a horrific physical and emotional trauma. But instead of letting that trauma define his limitations, he reframed the adversity into an opportunity. Well, he used the stark perspective he gained from almost dying to start a highly successful business selling motivational quote cards.
Wow. It reminds me of that Napoleon quote, every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. You just have to have a clean enough window to spot the seed in the dirt.
Exactly.
Okay, let me hit pause for a second because this is starting to sound dangerously close to, like, just smile, never quit, and you'll be rich and invincible. I have to push back on this framework a bit. Claiming that if you just project a positive attitude and try hard enough, you will naturally attract opportunities and overcome everything. Doesn't that vastly oversimplify how the real world works?
It's a highly necessary critique. I mean, if we ignore reality, we are just selling fairy tales.
Right, like telling someone who is facing systemic poverty or intense industry discrimination or a severe physical disability to just clean your mental window and stop complaining feels completely out of touch. It ignores the socioeconomic realities that act as very real, literal, concrete walls in people's lives.
It absolutely does. And to understand the limits of positive thinking, we have to look at the work of the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu. Bourdieu wrote extensively about a concept called social capital.
Social capital, okay.
Yeah, social capital is the idea that your networks, your socioeconomic background, your education, and the unearned advantages of your circumstances play huge, undeniable roles in your trajectory. You cannot simply positive think your way out of a systemic barrier. If the bank won't give you a loan because of systemic redlining, having a squeaky clean mental window doesn't magically put money in your account.
Right, so does that mean this whole attitude framework is fundamentally flawed?
Mm.
Are we just making privileged people feel better about themselves?
Not at all. But it means the advice requires critical context. A positive attitude should absolutely not be viewed as a magic wand that instantly erases inequality or structural barriers. But, and this is the crucial mechanism, it must be viewed as the necessary fuel required to navigate those barriers.
Oh, I see. Doesn't remove the wall, but it gives you the cognitive endurance to figure out how to climb it.
Precisely. If you have a birdie mental window and you slam into a systemic barrier, your dominant thought will be, the system is rigged, I quit. And you will stop taking action.
Which guarantees failure.
Right. But if you have a clean window, you don't deny that the barrier exists. You acknowledge the wall is there and it's unfair. But your dominant thought becomes, how do I get over, under, or around this? A positive attitude is what allows you to take those terrifying baby steps out of your comfort zone. It builds the resilience you need to face deep unfairness without letting it destroy your drive.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you go about your day-to-day? If we synthesize this entire journey, it really boils down to a very famous ratio. Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it.
And that 90% is your attitude. To achieve whatever success looks like for you, you have to start by taking out the squeegee. You have to actively clean your mental window. Acknowledge the dirt, acknowledge the trauma and the setbacks, but do not let them permanently blur your vision of what is possible.
Then, you have to meticulously audit your vocabulary. Stop nursing your troubles by complaining about them to anyone who will listen. Choose words that act as actual construction tools, building beliefs that compel you to move forward.
And finally, you have to step out of your comfort zone and take relentless, committed action. You have to be willing to fail 13 times like Benjamin Roll, knowing that failure isn't an indictment of your worth. It is just data helping you adjust your approach for the 14th try.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive. But before you go, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over today. There is a fascinating Hindi word, the thastu.
Thastu. It roughly translates to, as you wish. In various mythologies, it's often used by a deity or the universe to bless a devotee. Whatever the person asks for, whatever they declare, the response from the universe is simply, as you wish.
Now, I want you to imagine that the universe is constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, listening to your internal monologue. And to every single thing you say, it replies with that one phrase, as you wish.
If you wake up and mutter, today is going to be a terrible day, I'm so exhausted, I can't handle this, the universe listens, nods, and says, as you wish.
If you look at a massive challenge at work and say, I'm never going to figure this out, I'm a total fraud, the universe says, as you wish.
But, if you clean your window, if
Yeah.
you speak of your goals, your resilience, and your unyielding commitment to doing whatever it takes, if you look at a barrier and say, I will find a way through this, the universe smiles and says, as you wish.
So the question you have to ask yourself right now, before you step into your next meeting, before you answer that email, before you make your next big decision, is what are you asking the universe to make true for you right now? Because remember, our unhappy lawyer, Jeff Keller, he looked at his miserable 9-to-5, grabbed the squeegee, and changed his dominant thought. He changed his window. And by doing that, he changed his entire world. The glass is right in front of you. Squeegee or mud. The choice is entirely yours.